Hello and welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Fry. Recently, Journal of Commerce staff writer Evan Saunders spoke with Hilary Peach. She's the author of Thick Skin, Field Notes from a Sister in the Brotherhood, about her experience as a traveling welder and as a woman in the trades crossing the country as a member of the Boilermakers Union. As we celebrate Women in Construction Week, we thought you'd like to hear Peach's thoughts on both her progress in the skilled trades and the challenges that remain for women as the industry becomes more diverse. Evan begins with a question about how Peach entered into the trades after graduating with an arts degree.
I know the book starts around 2000, 2001. When did you get into the trades, and what was kind of the genesis of that?
I started my C-level welding course in 1996, and I did that. I had taken a degree at UBC in theater. I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in theater and English, and the kind of artwork that I was doing, it's not a steady living. It's not a dependable way to make, it's not a reliable, I guess it is dependable, but it's not a reliable way to make a living. And I just needed a day job. So I tried some different things, and this is what sort of shook out the bottom of the hopper. And I tried welding in a trades exploration class on the Sunshine Coast, actually. And I didn't want to spend it fixing broken things, so well, I'll do this, and then I can make, little sculptures or coat hooks or all the things that you make when you start out as a welder. And I did that. That was fine.
In this next clip, Peach talks about balancing her interest in and creation of art along with pursuing a construction career.
I totally understand. The arts is not necessarily the most dependable living, and that's at a certain point you got to try and make ends meet. So it's very commendable of you, and really cool that I think your story has bookended itself by coming back to that.
Yeah, it has. That's very interesting. So my teacher, my artistry teacher, who lives in Massachusetts, her name is Linda. She would distinguish between your artwork your heart work and your money work. And even if you are doing the thing that you love for money, there's a conversation in there about being very sure of differentiating between the two, right? And making sure that you're not selling the wrong stuff, basically. And for those of us who sort of need to do both, right? I mean, there are some people who are lucky enough to make a career out of the thing that they love most in the world. And then there are those of us who kind of do one thing because they really love it, and then they do the other thing because they need to pay the rent. And just because you become a professional in one career doesn't mean you're a hobbyist in the other one, right?
Absolutely.
In the art side. You can do both. So I always describe it as parallel paths, right?
Peach also talked about the relationships she established in the trades and outside expectations about working as a woman in the trades versus the reality she's experienced, as well as how a lot of boilermaking techniques are needlessly mysterious.
When I started, people would want to interview me about what it's like to be a woman in trades. And it's always from the angle of like a woman in a man's world. And I would talk about the lifts that we made or what it's like to spend a day inside a steam drum. And they had no interest at all in any of those things. They actually don't want to know what it's like being a woman in the trades. They want to know what it's like being a woman surrounded by men who are really mean to them.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very small part of this career path, and it's the least interesting part to me. So I didn't want to write a book about that. I didn't want to write a book where women are victims and men are mean. Like that's because it was such a small part of my experience.
Yeah.
Most of the men that I worked with are totally fantastic, right? And there's so much more to it. That's just a very narrow bandwidth.
Yeah.
So there's all this other experience that nobody ever really talks about, like that I hadn't, except Kate Braid has talked about it. Susan Eisenberg wrote a book of essays about experiences in the trades, but very little about working on the tools is written down at all by anybody. So I wanted to write a book that showed respect for tradeswomen as tradespeople, right? Not just as martyrs going in and toughing it out against these bad attitudes. But I also wanted to write a book that was respectful of men. because it's the men who are our teachers and our colleagues and our partners and the people who show us all the stuff. And, you know, like in Boilermakers, you work in partners. You don't work alone. So where would I be without those guys?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something I was going to ask you was one of my favorite aspects of the story was all the technical details. You really did a great job bringing me into a world that I've certainly never experienced and talking about so many things that I didn't understand, but in a way that I was able to visualize you guys working on these things. So I thought that was an excellent aspect and very, very clear.
Thank you. And that's another thing that isn't talked about or isn't written down very much. So when you go to welding school or you're on the tools and you're learning how to TIG weld, how to put in a root that is going to be x-rayed, because we're welding pressure parts. They're having, 2,500 pounds of pressure of steam pressure in the superheaters of a recovery boiler, or 25,000. Don't quote me on the pressure because I don't even know what those big recovery boilers
Lots of pressure
are at, right?
Yeah.
They x-ray them and they have to be 100%. So there are specific things that you have to do to achieve that, and nobody's written down because your partner teaches you that on the job. And it's sort of secret knowledge. Like, we don't want the pipe fitters to know, but it's pretty funny. So I wanted to put some of that stuff down too. Like, okay, this is how you do a tie-in without leaving a fisheye, right? So because it's so mysterious, there's so much mystery around it all. It's like, yeah, you know what? It's not actually mysterious. It's technique.
Yeah.
And this is what the technique is. And you can do it regardless of who you are.
She also spoke to Evan about conflict on the job site and outdated attitudes.
So here's the thing. I can go onto a job site and get into a personality conflict with anybody, male, female, my boss, my apprentice, it doesn't matter, like anybody. And the language around that is fairly typical. People who are in that situation will say things to each other, like they'll say, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about," or "No, I don't agree with you," or "You're wrong," or even "I don't like you." Like, there are personal statements where you're into it with somebody, and it could be anybody, right? So there's kind of that happens rarely, but sometimes in any human condition environment. There is the very narrow bandwidth of true misogynists, men who just don't want women anywhere. They just don't like women, right? There's that. But that's not exclusive to the trades. I mean, we've seen that recently in Hollywood and in professional sports and in the RCMP and in education, like in universities, right? Like, it's just, there's more cover, I think, in one of these other places, or it's more overt or more languaged in the trades. But to me, that's pretty rare. But the stereotype is that all the men are like that, are just assholes. What is more common is that, and the thing that I was sort of learning after talking to people after this book is that, like, since the Industrial Revolution, there has been the big myth, which is that working class men, mainly white working class men, have been told, which is that only they can do the work. Only they can do these certain things. Only you can build this bridge. Only you know how to design this transportation infrastructure. Only you can fix this car engine or operate this machine, right? And part of that myth is, and you must, because the world needs you, right? We need you to do this. So these guys, generations of working class people have kind of accepted this storyline. But the problem is that it's a big fat lie. So it's not actually true that you can only do this work if you're a guy and you're white, right? But they've lived in that for a long time, and they've learned it from their fathers and their grandfathers, and it's a part of their reality. It's a belief system. And since it's a hyper male environment, all of these guys are working together in this common belief system. Then a woman shows up on the job, and she's a ticketed Red Seal, whatever, and she's there to go to work because she's been dispatched like everybody else has. And it's not, I used to think it was territorialism, right? Oh, they think the women are going to take the jobs. But more like just by being present, you're disrupting this whole belief system.
Yeah, very well said.
You're destabilizing the whole infrastructure that these guys operate under. And now we have a skilled labor shortage. And, what are we going to do? There's a skilled labor shortage. We don't have the people. We can't find the people. Oh no. It's like, well, you know what? Maybe if you didn't exclude, so you're excluding 52% of the population, which are women, and then you're excluding anybody who's not white. You're actually accepting a very narrow demographic of people to be your skilled labor base. So maybe just kind of open that up and you wouldn't have as much problem bringing bodies in,
Finally, Peach addressed taboos in construction culture that hamper progress in addressing mental health and dealing with addiction.
Well, we've lost a lot of members, and some very young, young apprentices, but journeymen too. We've lost a lot of members to overdoses over the years, and to other types of mental illness. And again, it's, I think, a consequence of a culture that has assigned certain topics as being taboo, right? We don't talk openly about vulnerabilities because that implies that person is weak or that person isn't stoic enough. So guys don't go around talking about their grief or their worries, or the things that are just really troubling them. And it leads to, so it all happens in the dark.
Yeah.
Right? And it leads to exactly what you're saying. So I think that's starting to change. I think that the more people we lose, finally, people are starting to say, oh, we should do something about this. And people like yourself, writing about it, bringing it into the consciousness more is super important, of course.
Thanks for listening to the Construction Record Podcast. You can hear us on Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Spotify, as well as the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Make sure to tune in next week as we come to you from Las Vegas at the ConExpo ConAg Conference. We'll be doing daily podcasts as well as live streams, which you can view on our Instagram account, The Construction Record, all one word. Thank you.